discuss what to expect from St. Brown and whether he should remain your top wide receiver until the fantasy playoffs. Amon-Ra St. Brown has been a solid name in fantasy football, ranking among the top 10 wide receivers of the season, regardless of the scoring system. With 7 consecutive games scoring touchdowns, he has been a production machine, breaking records in the Lions franchise. However, a closer look reveals that his consistency in yardage has fallen short of expectations. In the last 6 games, St. Brown has surpassed 60 yards only once. 3 of those games were under 50 yards, raising the question, is his touchdown dependence sustainable? The Lions team has been dominating their opponents, and the trend of overwhelming victories could mean fewer passes for the team's number 1 wide receiver. With matchups against the Jaguars, Colts, and Bears, St. Brown's situation may continue to be influenced by a lack of game volume. The approaching fantasy trade deadline raises a red flag for anyone considering making changes to their roster. Experts like Josh Larkey have recommended selling St. Brown precisely because of his touchdown dependence. For Larkey, St. Brown's production is not as sustainable as it seems, especially considering the scenario where the Lions don't need a high pass volume to dominate games. Chris O'Brien also joins the conversation, stating that while St. Brown is a constant threat in the red zone, his yardage production has been limited. O'Brien suggests that if you're in a fantasy league with good wide receiver options, selling St. Brown for players like Puka Nacua, DK Metcalf, or A.J. Brown could be a good strategy. But ultimately, when is the right time to make this move? If you have depth at wide receiver, it may be time to consider these trades. If your team needs more consistency elsewhere, like at running back, it might be the right moment to target players like Josh Jacobs from the Packers as a viable trade. Looking at the Lions' upcoming opponents, we can see that St. Brown's chances for big yardage opportunities are decreasing. Against teams like the Jaguars, Colts, and Bears, Detroit is likely to dominate from the start, meaning less need for a heavy passing game. With a strong defense and an offensive line that's been supporting Jared Goff, victories could continue to be earned through the running game or short passes, leaving St. Brown with fewer targets. This scenario, of course, could be challenging for fantasy managers relying on consistent performance from St. Brown. And despite his impressive streak of consecutive touchdowns, this situation may not repeat indefinitely. Therefore, it's essential to look at alternatives that provide more stability to your fantasy team. If you're considering making a trade, another important point is that the wide receiver market is filled with high-performing options. Players like Puka Nacua, DK Metcalf, and A.J. Brown have shown more consistency in terms of yardage, and their teams, unlike the Lions, may have a greater need for regular offensive production, regardless of the score. These options may have more opportunities week after week to rack up points in different fantasy formats, which could be a key differentiator in the final stretch of the season. If your priority is strengthening the backfield, as suggested, Josh Jacobs could be an excellent choice. Although he hasn't stood out as much as in past seasons, the Packers running back could still offer the consistency needed to keep your team competitive. He has the ability to be utilized in various game situations, and with teams looking for more offensive balance, he may see more game volume in the coming weeks. The question now is, do you feel comfortable trading St. Brown? If the answer is yes, remember that trading him for another high-level wide receiver or even a solid running back could be a strategic move to balance your fantasy team. This is especially relevant if you're in a league with playoffs approaching and want to ensure the highest possible points with more consistent players. Stay alert to market moves. The fantasy landscape is always changing, and those who can anticipate and make the right trades may secure a strong performance in the final weeks. The decisions you make now could be the key to taking your team to victory in the fantasy playoffs. As a fan of the Detroit Lions, I think Amon-Ra St. Brown's performance up to Week 11 has been impressive, but it's also important to recognize that he's in a phase of excessive touchdown dependence, which could be a bit risky in the fantasy context. What stands out to me, and something many fans may also be noticing, is the balance the team has been showing in games. The defense has been solid, and the running game has been effective. This means that in the coming weeks, when the Lions are dominating their opponents, the passing offense might decrease, and St. Brown's target volume may not be as high. As a fan, I would be concerned about St. Brown's lack of consistency in yardage, especially if the team continues to prioritize the running game to secure wins. He has potential, but if I were in fantasy, I'd consider selling him now while his value is high, based on the touchdowns. However, if you have a strong team in other positions and need depth, it could be a good opportunity to strengthen other areas, perhaps a running back like Josh Jacobs, who still holds a lot of value, or more consistent wide receiver in terms of yardage like DK Metcalf or A.J. Brown. But, of course, in the end, being a Lions fan is always about believing that the team can surprise and that players like St. Brown have the ability to shine, regardless of the scenario. So, for those who believe in his potential, he may still have great weeks ahead. It's just that, with the way the Lions are dominating, we need to be realistic about the volume of passes he may receive. This is my view as a Lions fan. Always optimistic, but also with a practical approach to decisions, especially in fantasy football. Did you enjoy this analysis of Amon-Ra, St. Brown, and strategies for your fantasy team? If so, don't forget to subscribe to the Lions News Fan Report and turn on notifications for more tips and updates on the Detroit Lions and the world of fantasy football.